We are diving into George Orwell's 1984, a book whose warnings have really become synonymous with modern political language.
They really have.
And I want to start with maybe the most chilling part of it. The terrifying idea that if you control the archive, if you control the records, you can literally redefine reality.
It's all right there in that one line.
Hmm.
The past was erased, the erasure forgotten, the lie became the truth.
So how does an author make a concept that terrifying actually feel plausible?
That's the key question. It's not just a dystopian thought experiment. It's almost a manual on how to seize control of the mind. And our mission here is to unpack the novel's really sophisticated rhetorical strategies.
To understand how Orwell makes that feel so immediate and visceral, not abstract.
Exactly.
So enjoy a bold new take on book coverage with this extended analysis. This is more than just a summary, which we do also include. This feature looks at how the author shapes their argument, builds influence, and earns your trust.
Or loses it.
Right. And it gives you the tools to read with sharper insight and greater discernment.
And this approach, I think, is also excellent for aspiring writers. Analyzing the structure of a master, like Orwell is, it's invaluable. If you find this format valuable, we'd love to hear from you. Your feedback really does help guide what we do next.
And to give you that deeper analysis, you are experiencing a unique two-host AI conversation powered by Google's Notebook LM for a more dynamic book analysis. Our focus today is to unpack the rhetorical architecture of 1984 that turns a political warning into, well, an experiential nightmare.
Let's get into it.
Okay, let's start with credibility, what classical rhetoric calls ethos. For a warning this severe to land, the author needs to be standing on pretty solid ground.
He does.
So what in Orwell's background gave him the authority to write this terrifying vision?
Well, Orwell established his ethos not really as a fiction writer, but primarily as this brutally honest, politically engaged journalist. What's critical is that he had seen the systems he was warning about up close.
Right, this wasn't just theory for him.
Not at all. He didn't just read reports on fascism or Stalinism or the propaganda of World War II. He witnessed the real-world twisting of truth in Spain, in critiques from Soviet sympathizers, and in the manipulation of language during the war.
So he wasn't just speculating from an ivory tower. He was distilling what he'd actually observed. And the timing, it couldn't have been more crucial. The book came out in 1949.
Right at the start of the Cold War.
Yeah.
Exactly. The timing, the occasion, meant his audience was already hyper-aware of secret police, of central planning, and the demand for ideological conformity.
So the book's purpose became a kind of political argument, a cautionary tale.
Yes, aimed squarely at a Western public that valued civil liberties but maybe underestimated how fast they could just erode. Orwell wanted to dramatize, from the inside, how totalitarianism feels to an ordinary person.
And that's where the structure itself becomes this incredible rhetorical tool. The novel is so linear. You have Winston's growing awareness, his brief and doomed resistance, and then
his ultimate devastating collapse.
It feels less like a novel and more like a psychological trap. Why that specific structure?
Because he's using that structure as a weapon to drive the emotional argument, what rhetoric would call pathos. By forcing you, the reader, to follow this inescapable downhill path, we don't just observe Winston's dehumanization.
We participate in it.
We participate in it. It's a slow, tightening trap where every little bit of hope is just systematically crushed, leaving the reader with this profound sense of despair.
And that connects directly to the perspective, right? We're locked into his point of view, confined to his thoughts, his small evasions, his mental struggles.
That's a fascinating point, because that narrative constraint rhetorically mirrors the political reality of Oceania. By keeping us stuck inside Winston's head with his memories and his doubts, Orwell makes us feel the psychological confinement that the party enforces.
You're desperate for more information, for a wider view, but the book just never gives it to you.
Never. And that mirrors Winston's own desperate search for some objective truth outside the party's walls. Even the setting itself, bombed out London, the dreary ministries, it's this constantly depressing environment, making sure we never forget that politics has invaded every single private space.
Okay, so if the structure creates the confinement, the core mechanism of control has to be language. Which brings us to Newspeak.
Absolutely. Newspeak is arguably the most impactful rhetorical device in the entire book.
So what is it really? It's not just simplified vocabulary.
No, it's a deliberate, systematic shrinking of the language. It's designed, as one of the party members explains, to diminish the range of thought. The ultimate goal is profoundly philosophical.
To make dissent literally unsayable.
And eventually unthinkable. If the vocabulary for a word like freedom just disappears, how long can the concept itself actually survive?
That link between language and thought is so central that he actually stops the narrative to explain it.
He does. He just pauses the fiction and attaches this pseudo-scholarly appendix at the end.
Which is such a brilliant rhetorical move.
It is. By shifting into that academic expository mode, he elevates Newspeak from just a fictional plot point to his central thesis about the critical link between language and reality.
Yeah.
He's essentially underlining the moral of the story for you.
He's saying, pay attention to the words you use because someone is trying to control them.
Precisely.
And then you get the slogans, the most famous examples of doublethink. War is peace, freedom is slavery, and ignorance is strength. These aren't just contradictory phrases to be repeated.
No, their paradoxical structure actually trains your mind to rationalize the absurd. Doublethink is the party's mastery of contradiction. It compresses these flat contradictions into rhythmic, memorable formulas that force you to hold two opposing beliefs at the same time.
So war is peace doesn't just mean war is good.
No, it means that the state of endless war is the necessary condition for the party's internal stability and peace. It's a rhetorical strategy that's designed to destroy logic itself, and it perfectly imitates the worst real-world propaganda that Orwell saw.
And that forces you, as the listener, to constantly assess the language being used all around you. Speaking of language and analysis, you can always check out Mindful Moments.
That's our YouTube channel.
Right. It offers AI book analysis, summaries, and critiques. It's all about inspiring reflection and rational thought, a great complement to this kind of detailed deep dive.
Absolutely.
So let's move into a deeper analysis of the book's atmosphere. How does Orwell build sensory plausibility? A kind of logic or logos, and sustain fear or pathos through his descriptions.
He creates this sensory field of pervasive grayness and deprivation. It's incredibly effective. He doesn't need high drama scenes in every chapter. Instead, he uses these spare but vivid images to create a background noise that constantly oppresses you.
You're talking about the specific visceral detail.
Yes, the constant smell of boiled cabbage in the cafeterias, the harsh burning taste of Victory Gin, the grit of dust and cheap tobacco that's just everywhere.
That attention to unpleasant detail is so crucial. It normalizes the horror.
Precisely. The rhetorical goal isn't to shock us once with some terrible event. It's to show us how people adapt to constant low-level horror when it becomes the inescapable background noise of daily life.
The citizens aren't always terrified. They're just perpetually deprived and grumpy.
Which is a much more durable and insidious form of control.
And this controlled environment is punctuated by these powerful, instantly recognizable symbols.
Icons, really. You have Big Brother as the ever-watchful authority, the telescreen as invasive technology, and then Room 101 as the ultimate personalized terror.
They condense these complex political concepts into something you can grasp instantly.
They're shortcuts to understanding the system.
Then there's the irony, which I think really sharpens the reader's understanding. Naming institutions like the Ministry of Peace, which runs the war, or the Ministry of Love, which tortures people.
That dramatic irony pervades every corner of Oceania, and it's Orwell's subtle tool for moral persuasion. It invites you, the reader, to see the lie more clearly than the characters who are trapped inside the system can.
You instantly recognize how the regime launders its brutality through euphemisms.
Exactly. Calling surveillance security or calling torture re-education. This rhetorical trick builds our moral outrage without Orwell having to spell it out on the page.
Okay, let's look at the actual mechanism of control that underpins everything, revisiting Winston's job at the Ministry of Truth. This is more than just a job description.
It's the dramatization of historical control. Winston's job, altering old newspapers, isn't just plot machinery. It's a rhetorical demonstration of how controlling the archives lets power redefine reality at will.
Right, like when the party announces a chocolate ration increased to 20 grams, but last week the ration was 30 grams.
So Winston simply goes back and alters the old records to say the ration was only 10 grams.
The moment the old record is destroyed, the lie is complete.
And that gives internal logic, that logos to the party system. It proves the logic we talked about at the very beginning. When history is mutable, there is no fixed standard of truth left.
Which makes external criticism impossible.
Totally impossible. And to manage the internal population, the party uses this synchronized, orchestrated rhetoric, the daily ritual of the 2-minute hate.
Yes.
That ritual is genius. It functions as mass emotional synchronization. By giving them the figure of Goldstein, the party creates this specific external target.
So it redirects all the population's frustration.
All of it. Their
Yeah.
anger about the boiled cabbage, the shortages, everything, it gets aimed at an external enemy. This ensures the party itself remains untouchable, and dissent is just harmlessly bled off through ritualized, synchronized anger.
So when we bring all these rhetorical strategies together, the limited perspective, the language control, the stark imagery, the systemic irony, what is the overall political effectiveness of 1984?
I think his purpose is fully achieved. It leaves the audience not just entertained, but profoundly wary of centralized, opaque power and deeply skeptical of political language that inverts meaning.
The combination makes the warning feel so personal and experiential.
It does, which is exactly why this book remains so relevant in discussions of surveillance, disinformation, and the weaponization of history today.
As we finish this deep dive into the rhetorical landscape of 1984, here is a provocative final thought for you to consider. If the past truly belongs to the party, and the party can erase and rewrite history at will, what then becomes the ultimate, most vulnerable target for a totalitarian regime to control, and why must the answer be memory itself?
A great question. Reflect on the nature of personal memory and truth as you consider the power of this novel.
You can click the link on screen for the in-depth book summary, subscribe, share this deep dive with a friend, purchase the book via our link, and always think rationally.
See the many genre-based book podcasts at Mindful Moments. Subscribe and nourish your mind on the go.